The sun slipped low over Oak Ridge Estates, stretching shadows across trimmed lawns and fences that all looked the same. The gate stood like a checkpoint to another country, the booth glowing under a fluorescent bulb that hummed faintly in the evening heat. A line of cars idled, engines muttering. At the front, a motorized wheelchair rolled forward, steady, deliberate, like a soldier advancing under fire. Elias Grant didn't lower his eyes. 52 years old, African-American, his left leg gone to war, his right arm scarred stiff by shrapnel. Bronze star on his mantle, dust collecting on metals no one in this neighborhood cared to see. His dignity was iron, hammered in places most men never survived. The guard leaned from the booth, orange skin under the glow, badge shining like something he'd earned. Rick Halpern chewed sunflower seeds, cracking shells between his teeth before spitting them at the pavement. His eyes slid down to Elias's missing leg, then up to his dark face. ID. Elias held it up without a word. Rick didn't reach for it. He grinned instead, a slow curl that carried more contempt than any curse. Military types always think the rules don't apply. Elias's voice was calm, measured. I live here. Same dues you pay. Open the gate. Rick chuckled, a sound made for performance. Behind Elias, a horn tapped twice, impatient. Two teenagers walked along the sidewalk, phones in their hands, pausing when they heard the tone in Rick's voice. Their eyes lit with the promise of drama. Rick leaned closer. His breath smelled of seeds and arrogance. Wheelchair warriors don't get special treatment here. Not in my neighborhood. The teens stopped. One whispered, "Record this." Elias's hand tightened on the armrest. His chest rose once steady. His silence hit harder than any protest. Rick's voice dropped, sharp as a knife slipped under ribs. You don't belong here. Truth is, your kind never did. Engines idled louder behind Elias. Another horn blared, long and sharp. Curtains fluttered in nearby homes. Eyes watched, but no one stepped out. The words hung, thick and heavy, like smoke that refused to clear. Elias had heard it all before, in stares and letters in the careful language of committees. His ramp was unauthorized. His flagpole was non-compliant. His presence was unsettling. He exhaled slow, looked Rick in the eye. You're standing between me and my home. Rick grinned wider, feeding on the power of delay. That's the point. The teen's phone gleamed, lens fixed, recording, history in the making. His friend muttered, "He's really saying that." A driver leaned on the horn again. Rick turned his head, barking, "Wait your turn." And then Elias spoke. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Funny, I've heard that before. Never from someone this small." Silence followed, even the horns cut off. Rick froze, his smirk faltering. The arrogance wavered, hairline cracks running through his armor of mockery. The teenagers didn't breathe. Their cameras caught everything. The stare, the pause, the way power suddenly shifted without warning. Elias didn't move, didn't raise his voice. His words hung there heavier than the insult before. The fluorescent light buzzed above. A moth batted against the glass. Cars idled, the smell of gasoline mixing with night air. Somewhere a dog barked, and then stopped, as though sensing the tension. Rick swallowed, a small motion but caught on camera. He leaned back just enough for the booth's shadow to swallow half his face. The gate still didn't move. Elias waited. The neighborhood watched, and the night grew heavier with every second the gate stayed shut. The gate finally clicked open, not because Rick chose it, but because the pressure of horns behind Elias forced his hand. He jabbed the button and the bars slid aside with a groan. Elias didn't thank him. He rolled forward in silence, head straight, every movement measured. The teenagers followed him with their phones until he disappeared into the neighborhood. Rick muttered into the booth speaker, "Shouldn't even be here," but his voice shook. Inside his house, Elias parked by the window where he could see the street. He'd chosen this home because it had a view of the flag he raised every morning. The same flag his unit carried in Kabul. The same flag folded on the coffin of his best friend. He stared at it for a long time, then at the stack of letters on His kitchen table, violation notices, complaints, threats of fines, each one written with sterile precision, each signed by the HOA board. Words about community standards, about uniform aesthetics, about preserving property value. Never words about who those standards excluded. He opened the Top 1. Your ramp must be removed within 30 days. It does not conform to approved architectural design. His hand trembled, not from weakness, but from memory. A flash of sand, a blast that ripped the air apart, the taste of iron in his mouth. The medic shouting, "Hold on, Elias." His brother in arms gone in a spray of dust and silence. He blinked, and the paper in his hand blurred. The doorbell rang. He wheeled over slowly. His neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, stood there, pale face, uneasy. She clutched her sweater tight, though the evening was warm. "I saw what happened," she whispered. Elias said nothing. She looked around before speaking again. "Rick shouldn't have said that, but the board, they don't listen. Complaints disappear. People who push too hard, well, they get fined until they sell." Her voice dropped lower. "I'm sorry. I don't want trouble." She stepped back before he could answer. The door closed, leaving silence heavier than her words. That night, Elias sat at his desk and wrote another letter. This one to the board, his 5th in 2 years. He listed every incident, Rick's words, the harassment, the illegal demands. He wrote it plain, soldier clear without anger. He signed it, folded it, placed it in an envelope. He knew what would happen. Another dismissal. Another silence. But soldiers fight even when they know the odds. The next day he dropped it in the mailbox. On the way back he passed 2 kids whispering on bikes. One pointed. The other held up his phone. The video was already moving, spreading beyond the neighborhood. That night Elias's niece called from 3 states away. Her voice buzzed through the phone, urgent. "Uncle Eli, you're on TikTok. That video at the gate, it's everywhere. People are furious." He didn't answer right away. He stared out at the dark street, quiet. Finally he said, "The world only hears when someone's filming." She hesitated. "You want me to take it down?" "No," he said softly. "Let them see." The following morning, cars slowed as they passed his house. Some neighbors nodded quietly, sympathy flickering. Like a match. Others turned away. The mail arrived, another envelope stamped with the HOA logo. He opened it at the kitchen table. "Your correspondence has been reviewed. No action will be taken at this time." He read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it on the growing pile. That afternoon, a man in a suit came to his door. HOA board member, slick hair, smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Mr. Grant," he said, "we've received your letters. We understand you're upset, but you must realize rules exist for a reason. The video circulating online misrepresents the situation." Elias looked at him in silence. The man cleared his throat. "We'd prefer this doesn't escalate. Lawsuits only hurt the community. Perhaps if you considered relocation, somewhere more accommodating." Elias's stare didn't break. His voice was low, steady. "I already relocated once, from Fallujah. I'm not moving again." The man's smile faltered. He left without shaking hands. That night the video reached the news. Anchor voices read Rick's words out loud. The footage played again and again. The insult, the silence, Elias's reply. The nation saw. The comment sections boiled. Veterans posted messages of solidarity. Strangers demanded answers. But inside Oak Ridge Estates, the gate still closed behind Elias. The board still sent letters. Rick still stood in his booth, shoulders squared, chewing seeds. The silence of institutions weighed heavier than the noise of the internet. In his living room, Elias stared at the medals in their dusty frame. He remembered the night his commander pinned the Bronze Star to his chest. He remembered the silence. After the firefight, the faces of men who didn't come home. He remembered why he fought. Not for flags, not for boards, not for rules, but for people who couldn't fight for themselves. He closed his eyes. The echoes of war blended with the present Shouts in a foreign tongue mixed with Rick's voice telling him he didn't belong. Both rang the same. Both cut the same. His phone buzzed again. Messages, hundreds, from strangers. Some thanked him. Some shared their own battles with HOAs, with racism, with silence. Elias didn't type a reply. He didn't post a statement. He sat in the dark, letting the weight settle. Soldiers knew patience. Soldiers knew when the silence before the storm was more powerful than any words. And outside, the neighborhood whispered. The video didn't fade. It grew. By the third day, news trucks idled outside the gates of Oak Ridge Estates. Reporters stood with microphones, rehearsing lines about a disabled veteran mocked by his own community. The HOA board issued a statement, a paragraph of polished denial. We value all residents equally. The recent viral video mischaracterizes the professionalism of our staff. Elias read it once, then set the paper down. He didn't laugh. He didn't curse. He folded it carefully, added it to the pile. At the booth, Rick still chewed seeds. His swagger hadn't disappeared, but his eyes darted more often toward passing cars. A group of veterans in leather jackets parked by the curb one afternoon, watching him in silence. Their patches read, Iraq, Afghanistan, Desert Storm. They didn't speak to Elias. They didn't need to. That evening, another notice slid under Elias's door. Unauthorized flagpole. Remove within 10 days. He sat in his chair and stared at it until the edges blurred. His mind drifted back, unbidden, to the desert night. His squad pinned down, tracer rounds slashing the dark. His hands raw from dragging his brother through sand while mortars rained. The scream when the blast tore his leg away. The silence after. He heard again the medic's voice. You'll live, soldier. You'll live. Now, in a quiet suburban kitchen, the words felt like a curse. The phone rang, a reporter this time. Mr. Grant, would you like to give a statement? The public wants to hear your side. He said only, I already gave it at the gate. Then hung up. The reporter's story ran anyway. Clips of Elias in uniform, Pentagon ceremonies, images of him saluting with his stiff right arm. The narration called him a hero. The footage of Rick's smirk replayed after. The contrast was undeniable. Neighbors began to shift. Some left notes on his porch. We support you. We're sorry. Others avoided eye contact altogether, scurrying inside when they saw his wheelchair glide past. Silence still ruled, but cracks showed in the facade. At the next HOA meeting, voices rose. A few board members argued to discipline Rick. Others insisted on standing firm, blaming social media mobs. The president of the board, a tall man with a polished smile, declared, We must project unity. Any weakness will invite lawsuits. Rick sat in the back, arms crossed, chewing harder than ever. He muttered loud enough for a few to hear. He should be grateful we even let him through the gate. The word spread like wildfire. Another recording, another leak. By morning, new headlines screamed across the internet. Elias sat by his window watching cameras flash at the entrance. He didn't call them. He didn't answer them. He simply watched, silent as always. A knock at the door. This time, two men, in suits. Government, not HOA. Their badges shown. Mr. Grant, one said, voice respectful. The Pentagon is aware of your situation. They'd like to extend recognition at next month's ceremony. You've served your country with distinction. The nation should know your sacrifice is honored. Elias studied them. His eyes narrowed slightly. The nation already knew. They just forgot. The men shifted uncomfortably. This recognition would be public, visible. Elias gave a short nod. Visibility has a price. They left him with paperwork, promises, formal words. He placed the papers on the same stack of notices from the HOA. Two piles now, one of contempt, one of honor. He didn't touch either. That night, silence pressed heavier than ever. He sat in the dark, the glow of the street lamp cutting through blinds. Outside, whispers grew louder. Neighbors debated in hushed voices. Cars slowed to stare. Reporters circled like crows. Elias closed his eyes. The war returned again. The smell of smoke, the sound of screams, the weight of a rifle in his hand. His brother's last words choked through blood. "Make it mean something," he whispered back into the dark. "I'm trying." The following morning, he found another envelope on his porch. Not HOA this time. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, "Stay quiet or regret it." He folded it once, set it atop the stack. No reaction, no fear. Only the steady patience of a man who had already faced worse than threats written in ink. By evening, the story reached national broadcasts. Anchors called him the face of dignity. Panels debated systemic racism in housing communities. Veterans appeared on shows demanding accountability. His silence only amplified the noise. And still, in Oak Ridge Estates, the gate closed behind him every night with a metallic clang, like prison bars. Rick's eyes burned with resentment, chewing harder, spitting shells more violently. The board stayed quiet. The notices kept coming. Elias said nothing. He let the storm gather. Because soldiers knew, silence was sometimes the sharpest weapon. By the end of the week, the HOA board could no longer meet in secret. Protesters stood outside the clubhouse, holding signs that read, "Respect our veterans, and dignity is not optional." Reporters swarmed the steps. The board members slipped inside under umbrellas and sunglasses. Though the sky was clear, Elias didn't attend. He stayed home, curtains half drawn, watching the coverage on television. Rick appeared briefly in a grainy clip, shoving a camera away. His voice cut through, raw and unguarded. "That cripple thinks he owns the place." The clip played again and again. The anchor's voice followed. "Calls for the HOA guard's dismissal are intensifying. Legal experts say the board could face civil rights violations." Elias muted the TV. The silence in his living room was heavier than any anchor's words. A soft knock came at his door. When he opened it, a young woman stood holding a folder. Her blazer looked too big for her, but her eyes were sharp. "Mr. Grant," she said, "I'm with the Civil Liberties Legal Center. We'd like to represent you. No charge." Elias studied her a long moment before speaking. "I didn't ask for lawyers." She nodded quickly. "I know, but the law is already circling. If you don't take control, they will, and not in your favor." He leaned against the doorframe. "What do you gain from this?" Her answer was quiet, almost rehearsed. "Justice looks better when someone earns it." For the first time in days, Elias's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He let her inside. They sat at his table surrounded by piles of letters. She leafed through them, frowning deeper with each one. "Every single notice targets you," she said. "Every one. The ramp, the flagpole, the vehicle restriction, all designed to push you out. This isn't about community standards. It's discrimination, clear and systemic." Elias didn't answer. He tapped one envelope with his finger. "They think paper weighs more than blood." Her pen hovered over her pad. "We'll take this to court." That night, word spread fast. Lawsuit, civil rights, national coverage. The story no longer belonged to Oak Ridge Estates. It belonged to the country. Rick drove past Elias's house in his pickup, headlights lingering too long. He slowed, lowered his window. "You're tearing this place apart," he growled. Elias sat on the porch unmoved. His reply was flat. "It was cracked long before me." Rick revved the engine and sped off, gravel spitting from the tires. The noise faded, leaving only the steady chirp of crickets. Days bled into nights. Reporters lined the sidewalks. Children whispered on bikes. Veterans returned, more of them this time, standing silent watch near the gate. Their silence carried weight. Their presence shifted balance. Inside the boardroom, arguments boiled. Some begged for Rick's firing, others dug in, insisting compliance was non-negotiable. The president's voice thundered over them. "If we yield, we set a precedent, and if we set a precedent, we lose control." But control was already slipping. One board member resigned quietly, citing personal reasons. Another leaked emails to the press, messages filled with coded language, complaints about undesirable elements and neighborhood purity. The words hit headlines like grenades. Elias watched the fallout from his chair. He barely moved. His phone rang constantly, interviews, requests, support. He answered none. The young lawyer handled it now. He remained the still point in a storm of motion. One evening, Mrs. Dawson returned. She carried a plate of cookies, her hands shaking. "I should have spoken sooner," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Elias looked at her kindly, but said nothing. Silence was answer enough. She set the plate down, tears brimming, and left quickly. The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. The papers landed on the board's desk like a detonator. Reporters cheered outside. Rick slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "It's a setup! He wanted this from the start!" But even his voice wavered now. The swagger was thinning, replaced by a twitch of fear around the eyes. That night, he drove past Elias's house again. Stopped. Sat in his truck staring at the flag swaying under the porch light. After a long minute, he spat on the pavement and sped off. Elias remained inside, watching through the blinds. He whispered to himself, "Cowards always need an engine." The lawyer visited again, updates in her folder. "The Pentagon ceremony is set. You'll be honored publicly, nationally. The contrast will crush them in court." Elias's gaze lingered on the stack of medals in the corner. "I never fought for ceremonies." Her voice softened. "Maybe not, but sometimes the world needs a symbol more than a soldier." He didn't reply. He didn't have to. She understood his silence. Outside, the whispers grew into conversations. Neighbors debated loudly now, no longer hiding behind curtains. Some defended the board, claiming rules must be enforced. Others pointed at Elias's service, his sacrifice, demanding justice. Lines were drawn, not in sand, but in sidewalks and cul-de-sacs. The HOA president gave a press conference, words polished, tone sharp. "This board stands for fairness, not favoritism. We reject the mischaracterizations circulating online." But when asked about the leaked emails, he faltered. Cameras caught the sweat at his temple, the stammer in his voice. The cracks widened. Elias watched from home, silent as ever. His niece called again, voice excited. "Uncle Eli, you're winning. Everyone sees it." He answered only, "Seeing is not winning. Not yet." The night grew long. Elias sat alone, the glow of the flag outside painting shadows across his floor. He closed his eyes, hearing once more the desert wind, the cries of his brothers. He remembered the words carved into every soldier's mind. Hold the line. And so he did. The courthouse, steps filled before sunrise. Cameras lined the path like rifles aimed, their lenses waiting to capture each move. Reporters rehearsed their scripts, speaking of civil rights, systemic abuse, and the silent veteran at the heart of it all. Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder near the entrance, not speaking, only standing. Their silence said enough. Elias arrived in a plain van driven by his lawyer. The crowd surged forward, microphones thrust out, questions hurled. "Mr. Grant, how does it feel to fight your own neighborhood? Do you believe racism is institutional in the HOA system? What do you want the outcome to be?" He rolled forward in his chair, eyes fixed ahead. No answers, no statements. Silence carved through the noise sharper than words ever could. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. The HOA board sat stiff at their table, polished suits, lips pressed thin. Rick leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw clenching every few seconds. His eyes darted to Elias, then away, as if staring too long burned. The judge entered. Silence fell like a curtain. The young lawyer rose. Her voice was steady, precise. "Your Honor, this case is not about property values. It is not about aesthetics. It is about discrimination. It is about a decorated veteran, a man who sacrificed his body for his country, being told he does not belong in his own home. The HOA's actions, and the conduct of their guard, are not isolated mistakes. They are patterns, systemic, deliberate. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Elias didn't move. He sat upright, still, a figure carved in stone. The defense spoke next. The HOA's attorney polished his words, dismissive but careful. The board enforces regulations equally. Mr. Grant's situation is unfortunate, yes, but rules cannot bend for one man. Allow exceptions and chaos follows. This is not about race. It is about order. Rick smirked at those words, tapping his fingers on the table. But the smirk didn't last. The lawyer presented the letters. Dozens of them, spread across the evidence table. Each one marked with violations: ramp, flagpole, vehicle. She read passages aloud, voice cutting. Your presence disrupts the community standard. Your modifications lower neighborhood value. Words that once hid behind official tone now rang with ugliness exposed. The leaked emails followed. The courtroom stirred louder as phrases echoed. Undesirable elements, neighborhood purity, keep it clean. The judge frowned. The defense shifted uncomfortably. Rick's smirk broke. He shifted in his seat, swallowing hard. The lawyer turned toward Elias. Mr. Grant, would you share with the court how these actions affected you? Every eye turned. Cameras leaned forward. Reporters readied pens. Elias drew a breath. He looked at the judge, then the board, then Rick. His voice was low, steady. I fought for people I never met. I bled for men who didn't look like me, didn't sound like me. Over there, no one cared what color you were. They cared if you could drag a brother out of fire. I came home missing a leg, missing an arm. That moves right. I came home carrying ghosts, and what I got was paper telling me I don't belong. A guard telling me I'm too broken, too black, too other. You ask how it affected me? It told me the battlefield didn't end overseas. It just changed uniforms. The silence after his words was complete. Even the cameras didn't click. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Elias leaned back, eyes calm, as though unburdened by speaking truth aloud. The defense attempted to recover, calling Rick to the stand. Rick swaggered forward, adjusting his tie. He avoided Elias's gaze, speaking too fast, too rehearsed. I was doing my job. He didn't follow procedure. Everyone has to show ID, everyone. I didn't mean anything by it. The lawyer's cross-examination was surgical. You told him he didn't belong. You told him his kind never did. Was that your job, Mr. Halpern? Rick stammered. It was out of context. Is it also out of context, she continued, holding up her phone, that you were recorded later saying, and I quote, that cripple thinks he owns the place? The recording played. Rick's voice echoed in the courtroom, undeniable. His face drained of color. The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel for silence. Rick tried to speak, but no words came, only a thin rasp. He looked small now, shoulders folding, arrogance leaking out like air from a punctured tire. The lawyer's final question landed like a strike. Mr. Halpern, do you believe you represent the values of Oak Ridge Estates? He stared at the floor. Silence. The judge dismissed him from the stand. He slumped back to his chair, broken posture replacing swagger. Elias didn't gloat, didn't smile. He simply watched, his eyes steady, his dignity untouched. Court recessed. Outside, reporters swarmed again. Mr. Grant, how do you feel after Rick's testimony? What do you think of the board's defense crumbling? Again, no answer. Elias rolled past them in silence. The crowd parted. The cameras followed every turn of his wheels. At home that night, his lawyer debriefed him. They're breaking. The evidence is too strong. Rick buried them with his own words. We're close. Elias stared at the flag outside his window. His voice was soft. Close doesn't mean done. She nodded, understanding. The nation kept watching. News anchors dissected every moment of testimony. Social media amplified Elias's quiet restraint, calling it power. Memes spread with his line at the gate. Never from someone this small. The HOA board hid behind their lawyer, but cracks widened. Resignations loomed. Sponsors withdrew support. The neighborhood that once prided itself on silence now vibrated with tension, and through it all, Elias stayed still. He carried silence like armor, letting others fight with words while he fought with presence. Because presence was all he had left, and it was enough. The second day in court felt different. The gallery was fuller, packed with veterans, activists, and neighbors who had once stayed hidden behind curtains. Reporters filled every seat, cameras perched on shoulders like rifles waiting to fire. The air buzzed with the weight of expectation. Elias entered quietly, his lawyer pushing his chair this time. He wore no medals, no uniform, only a plain dark jacket. Still, the room straightened as he passed, like soldiers recognizing a commander. The HOA board sat stiff on the opposite side, whispers chasing them. Their president's polished smile was gone, replaced with the pale sheen of sleepless nights. Rick avoided eye contact with everyone, shoulders curled inward, fingers tapping nervous rhythms on the table. The judge called order. The lawyer rose, her tone sharper now. "We call the president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA to the stand." The man walked slowly, adjusting his tie, each step heavier than the last. He swore in, settled into the witness chair, but his posture betrayed unease. "Mr. Wallace," the lawyer began, "how long have you served as president of the HOA?" 8 years, he answered, voice tight. "During those 8 years, did you oversee enforcement of community rules?" "Yes." "Did you approve or sign violation notices sent to Mr. Grant?" He shifted. "Most of them." "Yes." "Most of them," she repeated. "Did you ever consider the impact of demanding a disabled veteran remove his wheelchair ramp?" His jaw clenched. "Rules apply to all. Exceptions weaken order." Her eyes narrowed. "Order. Tell me, Mr. Wallace, is it order or exclusion? Because here is your email." She lifted a printed copy. "We must maintain neighborhood purity. Certain elements drive down value." "Did you write this?" His face drained. He stammered. "That was taken out of context." "Context?" She leaned closer. "Tell this court what context makes purity an acceptable term when discussing who lives in your community." The gallery murmured. The judge silenced them with his gavel, but the damage was done. Wallace shifted in his seat, sweat beading at his temple. She pressed harder. "Mr. Wallace, did you ever discipline your guard, Mr. Halpern, for telling Mr. Grant he didn't belong?" I wasn't aware of that until the video." "Not aware? You received letters from Mr. Grant detailing every incident. Here they are." She stacked them high on the evidence table. "And you dismissed them, everyone. Signed your name at the bottom. True?" Wallace swallowed. "Yes." Her voice cut like steel. "So you were aware. You chose silence." The courtroom froze. Wallace's hands trembled on the stand. His polished mask crumbled. Elias watched without expression. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply observed, his presence heavier than any accusation. The defense attorney scrambled, objecting, claiming bias, misinterpretation. The judge overruled. When Wallace stepped down, his steps faltered. His eyes flicked toward Elias, desperate, searching for something. Mercy, perhaps. Elias gave him nothing, only silence. Rick was called again. His swagger had evaporated completely. His testimony contradicted itself, stammered and weak. Each denial was met with another recording, another witness. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced with a hollow stare. By midday, the court recessed. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Signs waved, justice for Elias. No more silence. Reporters shouted questions, but Elias rolled past them, silent as ever. His lawyer spoke instead, crisp and brief. The truth is unraveling. That is all. Back. Inside his home, Elias sat by the window once more. The flag outside shifted in the wind, shadows stretching across his floor. His niece called again, her voice trembling with excitement. "Uncle Eli, you're everywhere. Hashtags with your name. People calling you a symbol," he answered quietly. "Symbols are heavy. They break men if they're not careful." "You're not breaking," she insisted. He said nothing. He only looked at the flag, remembering the men who had broken before him, carrying burdens heavier than cameras. That night Rick appeared at his gate, drunk, leaning against his truck. His shouts carried through the neighborhood. "You ruined me, you hear me? You ruined everything." His words slurred, broken by sobs. "They're firing me. My family's done. All because of you." Elias sat on his porch, silent. His stare met Rick's across the lawn. No words, only the weight of truth pressing harder than any fist. Rick stumbled back into his truck, slammed the door, and drove off, tires screaming against asphalt. The night fell quiet again, but the echoes of his rage lingered. The next day in court, the atmosphere was different. The defense came thinner, weaker. The board whispered among themselves, pale and trembling. Another resignation was announced. Before the session began, the judge raised an eyebrow at the shrinking lineup. The lawyer presented closing evidence, photos of Elias in uniform, testimonies from his unit, medals awarded. The courtroom saw not a man in a wheelchair, but a soldier who had carried others through fire. Then she gestured toward the stack of letters. "And this is how Oak Ridge Estates thanked him." Silence. Heavy. Undeniable. Finally, she turned to Elias. "Would you like to make a final statement?" Every camera leaned in. Every breath in the room held. Elias looked at the judge, then the jury, then the people who had written him off in ink. His voice was steady, low. "I fought for this country. I bled for this country. I gave pieces of myself I'll never get back. And when I came home, the war didn't end, it just wore new faces. But I am still here. I will always be here. Because home isn't theirs to take." The room erupted, not in noise, but in silence. A silence deeper than applause, thicker than outrage. The kind of silence that carried truth like a weight too heavy to deny. Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes calm, as the oppressors shifted in their seats, unraveling piece by piece under the weight of dignity they could never match. The trial stretched into its third day, and by then the courthouse was no longer just a building. It was a stage. News trucks lined the street in rows. Commentators broadcast live from the sidewalk, pointing at the entrance like it was the front line of a war. Hashtags trended across every platform. Elias's face, calm and still, appeared on screens in diners and airports and classrooms. Inside, the tension grew heavier. The jury took notes, their pens moving slower, their eyes darting toward Elias, more often than the defense. The judge's gavel fell harder, his patience tested by constant objections from the HOA attorney. Rick looked like a man shrinking by the hour. His tie hung crooked, sweat stains darkened his shirt. He avoided Elias's eyes completely now, chewing gum as if it could keep his jaw from trembling. Wallace, the president, no longer wore his polished smile. He hunched at the table, whispering urgently to his lawyer, eyes bloodshot from nights without sleep. The young lawyer for Elias rose again, her tone sharp as a blade. "The defense has claimed this is about rules applied equally. But let's examine the record. Over 8 years, how many other residents received violation notices for ramps, for flagpoles, for veterans' plates on their vehicles?" She held up a sheet. "The answer is none. Not one. Only Mr. Grant." The jury shifted. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge silenced them with a glare. She continued, relentless. "This is not about rules. It is about targeting. It is about systemic discrimination disguised as policy. And it is about the silence of a board that chose convenience over justice. The defense tried to recover, but their words rang hollow. The board sought to preserve property value. That is their right. The lawyer's rebuttal came swift. Property value over human dignity? Over basic rights? Over the service of a man who risked his life for the same freedoms you now deny him? The defense faltered. Pen scratched faster at the jury box. Elias sat silent, eyes forward, hands resting steady on his chair. He didn't need to add words. His silence had become testimony heavier than any argument. During recess, reporters swarmed the steps again. Neighbors stood among them, some with signs, some with shame on their faces. One older man stepped forward when Elias rolled past. His voice cracked. "I didn't speak before. I should have. I'm sorry." Elias paused, met his eyes. He didn't reply. A nod was all. The man broke into tears as Elias moved on. Back in the courtroom, closing statements began. The HOA attorney spoke first, his tone desperate, sweat shining under the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case has been blown out of proportion. My client sought only to enforce rules fairly. If you punish them for that, you punish every community association in America. Ask yourselves, is that justice?" He sat down quickly, wiping his brow. Then the lawyer for Elias stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace. She simply spoke, each word clean and deliberate. "Justice is not paperwork. Justice is not silence. Justice is not pretending discrimination doesn't exist because it hides in polite language. Justice is seeing what is plain and refusing to look away. You saw the letters. You heard the recordings. You watched the smirks, the denials, the words of purity and exclusion. And you saw Mr. Grant. You saw his dignity. You saw his restraint. Now it is your turn to speak." She turned and gestured to Elias. The jury's eyes followed. He didn't move, didn't smile. He was stone, steady, unbroken. The judge gave instructions, then dismissed them to deliberate. Outside, the crowd swelled. Voices chanted his name. Signs waved. Veterans stood in formation by the courthouse steps, back straight, salutes crisp. Reporters shouted, hungry for reaction. Elias rolled through them in silence, his lawyer shielding him from microphones. His eyes remained on the horizon, calm amid chaos. That evening he sat by his window again. The flag outside caught the glow of streetlights, shadows dancing across the lawn. His niece called, voice trembling. "Uncle Eli, the world's waiting. Everyone's watching." He said softly, "Let them wait. Truth doesn't need to hurry." Night fell. Sleep didn't come. He sat awake, hearing echoes of the desert once more. The blasts, the cries, the silence after. He thought of his brothers, of the medic's voice, of the promise he carried home. Make it mean something. The next morning, court resumed. The jury had reached a verdict faster than anyone expected. Whispers filled the room as they filed back, in faces grave, eyes set. Elias sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. Rick twisted in his chair, knuckles white. Wallace's lips moved in a silent prayer. The defense attorney clutched his briefcase like it might save him from drowning. The judge asked the foreman, "Have you reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." The paper was handed over, unfolded, read aloud. Each word dropped heavy, final. The verdict struck like thunder. Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters scrambled. The gallery erupted into noise. Veterans saluted. Neighbors whispered. Elias didn't move. His face betrayed nothing. Only his eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, steady as stone. Rick slumped in his chair, head dropping, into his hands. Wallace sank back, pale and broken, the weight of collapse settling over him. The gavel struck for order. The courtroom quieted. Elias rolled forward slightly, the silence around him thick, unshakable. He spoke only once, voice low, clear enough for all to hear. "Home isn't theirs to give, it isn't theirs to take, it's mine, and I'm not leaving." The room froze, cameras caught every syllable, and the silence that followed stretched, longer than applause ever could. The verdict rippled through the country before the gavel's echo faded. News alerts lit phones like flares. Commentators scrambled to frame it. A veteran wins against systemic discrimination. A neighborhood brought to its knees by silence and arrogance. The clip of Elias's final words replayed on every channel, his steady voice cutting through the noise. Back in Oak Ridge Estates, the atmosphere shifted overnight. Lawns that once stood uniform now bore signs. "We stand with Elias." Others remained bare, shutters closed, silence dripping from windows. Lines were drawn in asphalt and hedges. Neighbors crossed the street rather than meet each other's eyes. Rick's house went dark. His truck sat idle in the driveway, tires flat, paint egged. He avoided daylight, slipping out only at night, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. His swagger was gone. At the corner store, whispers followed him. "That's the guy." Children mimicked his words with cruel precision. "You don't belong here." He shouted at them once, but their laughter stung worse than silence. Wallace resigned the next morning. The HOA board fractured, members fleeing under pressure. Lawsuits threatened from every side. Their email inbox filled with hate mail, their names plastered across headlines. Sponsors cut ties. Banks froze accounts. The fortress of power they had built on silence crumbled in public view. Reporters lingered at Elias's lawn, cameras waiting for statements. He gave none. His lawyer spoke briefly. "Justice was served. Mr. Grant asks for peace." Then she left, leaving the cameras hungry. Inside his house, Elias moved through quiet rooms. The stack of violation notices remained on the table, untouched. He stared at them for a long time, then swept them into a box, sealing it shut. Not destroyed, kept like evidence of a war fought and won. His niece visited, eyes shining with pride. "Uncle Eli, you changed everything. People are calling you a symbol of strength. They want to meet you, interview you, invite you to speak." He shook his head slowly. Symbols talk too much. Dignity whispers. She frowned, but she understood. That night, a small crowd gathered outside his home, candles flickering. They didn't chant, they didn't shout. They stood in silence, honoring him in the same way soldiers honored fallen brothers, by standing watch. Elias looked through the window, eyes softening. He didn't step out, but he left the curtains, open, letting them see he was there. Across town, Rick sat in a bar, face unshaven, drink half empty. His friends had stopped calling. His job was gone. His name was poison. The bartender avoided eye contact, sliding drinks without a word. A man at the counter muttered, "That's the racist guard." Rick's fist tightened, but he didn't swing. He knew the fight was gone. Wallace hid behind lawyers, but the lawsuits piled higher than his defenses. Former allies turned on him, each blaming the other. The once proud president of Oak Ridge Estates became a ghost, seen only in grainy paparazzi shots leaving courthouses, head down, lips pressed thin. Meanwhile, Elias received a letter, not a notice, but an invitation. The Pentagon, a ceremony, recognition not just as a soldier, but as a symbol of resilience. His lawyer urged him to attend. His niece begged. The nation expected it. He sat at his table, the letter open before him. He read it twice, then folded it gently. His reflection in the window stared back at him. "The battlefield never ends," he whispered. The day of the ceremony arrived. Cameras flashed, flags waved. Officials lined the stage, medals gleaming under lights. Elias rolled forward, slow, steady. The crowd erupted in applause, but he raised his hand once and silence fell. He accepted the medal without flourish. The general leaned down, whispered, "Your country owes you more than this." Elias's reply was quiet. "Then pay it forward." The cameras caught nothing but the pinning of the medal, the salute he returned with his stiff right arm. The applause roared again, but Elias's face remained steady, untouched by spectacle. Back home, the community shifted. Children played, near his lawn without fear. Neighbors once silent now offered greetings. Some apologized, their voices trembling. Others stayed quiet, shame too heavy to bridge. The HOA dissolved, its power stripped. New committees formed, smaller, humbler. The gate that once stood as a wall became just another set of bars on hinges, opening without question when Elias rolled through. Rick's house went up for sale. Few looked twice. The sign lingered, weathered by rain, ignored by buyers. Rumors swirled of debts, of bankruptcy, of a man undone by his own contempt. Wallace moved away quietly, his name forever tied to disgrace. Elias remained. His flag still waved, his ramp still stood. His silence still carried more weight than any speech. At night, he sat on his porch, the hum of crickets surrounding him. His niece sat beside him sometimes asking, "Do you feel like you won?" He would look at the flag, at the dark sky, at the quiet street that once spat him out. His answer was always the same. Winning's not the point. Standing is. The world moved on. News cycles shifted. Other scandals filled headlines. But in Oak Ridge Estates, the story lingered. Whispers carried through streets. Children retold it in hushed tones. Neighbors measured their words more carefully. The silence of complicity had been broken, and Elias sat at the center unshaken, watching. Not a symbol to himself, not a hero in his own eyes, but simply a man holding the line. Weeks passed, and Oak Ridge Estates no longer looked untouched. The lawns were still trimmed, the fences still white, but an invisible scar ran down every street. Neighbors crossed paths with softer eyes now, greetings hesitant but real. Children rode bikes past Elias's home without stopping, no longer whispering, no longer pointing. They simply rode, as if the storm had normalized into life again. Old HOA signs came down. The board had dissolved officially, its files seized for investigation. A new committee formed, volunteers instead of rulers, their meetings held in open yards instead of closed clubhouses. There were no polished speeches, no letters stamped with threats. The rules shrank into guidelines. The silence of authority was gone. Elias remained the still point. He rose each morning, rolled to the flagpole, and raised the flag himself. His hand moved stiff but steady. The fabric caught wind and rose above rooftops, just as it had before. Neighbors paused when they saw it. Some saluted quietly. Some bowed heads. Others watched from windows, remembering. Rick's house stayed dark. The for sale sign leaned crooked, the paint on his shutters peeling. Grass grew longer, no longer, trimmed to regulation. At night, his truck sometimes coughed to life, driving away into darkness only to return before dawn. But he never came outside in daylight. He had become a ghost in the place he once policed. Wallace disappeared completely. Rumors spread. He'd left town, sold his home, filed for bankruptcy. Others claimed he lived under a different name now, hiding from the wreckage of his reputation. Elias didn't care which story was true. For him, both men were already gone, erased not by fists or shouts, but by their own silence when truth caught them. Letters poured in still. Veterans wrote of shared battles. Strangers wrote of hope. Some wrote confessions of complicity, how they had stayed quiet in their own neighborhoods, letting injustice fester. Elias read them at night, one by one, before placing them in a box, beside the old violation notices. Two histories sat side by side, one of hatred, one of solidarity. Both told the story of silence broken. His niece visited often. She walked the streets with him, pushing his chair when he let her. People waved now. Some apologized directly. I didn't know what to say back then. I should have spoken sooner. Elias never answered with words. He only nodded, eyes steady, letting silence serve as judgment and forgiveness both. One evening, a boy from down the street knocked at his door. He couldn't have been older than 12. He stood clutching a small notebook. "Mr. Grant," he said, voice trembling, "we have to write about heroes at school. Can I write about you?" Elias looked at him for a long moment. His chest rose, then fell. Finally he spoke. "Write about the men who never came home. They're the real heroes." The boy nodded, eyes wide, and ran off. That night, Elias sat on his porch, remembering again the desert. The faces of brothers gone. The weight of their absence heavier than any metal. He whispered their names under his breath one by one, letting the crickets carry them into the dark. The Pentagon ceremony replayed on television, clips cut into news specials. Politicians praised him. Commentators dissected him. Memes still spread his words. But in Oak Ridge Estates, life returned to rhythm. Trash collected on Fridays, lawns mowed on Saturdays, children splashed in sprinklers. Normalcy, but different. A quiet thread of awareness stitched through it all. Elias remained watchful. He saw the way neighbors glanced at him, sometimes guilty, sometimes grateful. He didn't need their praise. He didn't crave their approval. His dignity had never been theirs to give. One afternoon, Mrs. Dawson came again. She looked older, shoulders bent but her eyes clearer. She held no cookies this time, only her hands ringing. "I kept silent too long," she said. "I let fear hold me. I thought if I stayed quiet, trouble would pass me by. But silence was the trouble. I know that now." Elias studied her, then gave a slow nod. She exhaled like a burden lifted. Later, that night, his lawyer visited with updates. Settlements had begun. Former board members agreed to pay damages. Rick's dismissal was permanent, his appeal denied. Wallace faced federal investigation. Justice written in papers thicker than the notices once used to hound him. Elias listened, then asked softly, "Does paper stop it from happening again?" She hesitated. "Not always. But it makes them think twice." He looked out at his flag. Thinking twice isn't the same as changing. She didn't argue. She understood. In the weeks that followed, the story faded from national headlines, replaced by new scandals, new tragedies. But in Oak Ridge Estates, it never faded. The whispers of truth lingered like echoes. Parents taught their children the story. Neighbors repeated it when strangers asked. The incident at the gate became a cautionary tale. Silence is complicity, arrogance collapses, dignity endures. And through it all, Elias stood his ground. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by existing, by refusing to move when told he didn't belong. Some nights he sat outside long after the street went dark, staring at the gate. It no longer stood as a barrier. It opened for him without hesitation now, the guard a quiet young man who saluted, each time. But Elias remembered the night it didn't. He remembered the laughter, the insult, the weight of being told once more that he was other. He whispered again into the night. Funny. Never from someone this small. The words still tasted of truth. The seasons turned and Oak Ridge Estates wore new colors. Leaves browned and fell across the sidewalks, crunching under children's shoes. The old HOA signs that once warned of fines were gone, replaced by nothing. The gate still stood, but it no longer carried fear. It opened without hesitation, no questions asked. Elias remained in his home, unchanged, yet transformed. His ramp stood firm, his flag rose higher, his presence undeniable. Neighbors who once avoided him now crossed the street to greet him, though he gave only nods in return. Dignity remained his language. Silence, his weapon. The young lawyer visited one, last time. She carried folders filled with settlements, signatures, final closures. "It's over," she said. "You've won." Elias looked at the box of old notices stacked in the corner. "Over?" he asked. She hesitated. "Legally, yes. They can't touch you again. You're safe." His eyes lingered on the papers. "Safe is just another word until the next man fights." She lowered her voice. "Then maybe you made it easier for the next man." He nodded once. That was enough. The Pentagon invited him again, this time to speak. He refused politely. "Ceremonies. Don't fix silence," he told them. "They just decorate it." Instead, he stayed home. Every morning he raised the flag alone. Every evening he lowered it, folding it with care as if still on duty. His neighbors often paused to watch. Some saluted. Some whispered his name. Others said nothing at all, but their silence no longer felt like denial. It felt like respect. Rick vanished eventually. His house was sold at auction, stripped of value. His truck disappeared. Rumors swirled of him moving to another state, working odd jobs under a different name. No one spoke of him fondly. He became a ghost story parents told their children. What happens when arrogance meets truth? Wallace faced trial of his own. Fraud, misuse of funds, discrimination lawsuits. His polished image destroyed. His name tied forever to shame. He, too, faded irrelevant as the power he once clung to. Elias endured, not as a hero in his own eyes, not as a symbol, but as a man who refused to leave when told he didn't belong. One evening, as the sun set red across the horizon, his niece joined him on the porch. She was older now, her voice steadier. She looked at him long, as though studying more than his scars. "Do you ever regret staying here?" she asked. He watched the gate in the distance. The bars reflected the last light, glowing faintly. Soldiers don't regret where they stand. They regret when they run. She nodded slowly. "Do you think things are better now?" He thought of the letters of support, of the children riding free, of neighbors learning to speak. He thought of Rick's silence, Wallace's fall, the fractured board, the new committee. He thought of the flag waving each morning. "Better," he said. "Not fixed, but better." She leaned her head against his shoulder. For once he allowed himself a faint smile. The night grew darker. Crickets sang. The neighborhood lay still. Elias whispered names again, the names of brothers gone, letting their memory hang in the air. His niece didn't ask this time. She understood. The final storm had passed, but battles never truly ended. He knew that. He carried it in his body, in his scars, in the silence between words. The world outside Oak Ridge moved on. But here, the lesson lingered. Dignity had broken arrogance. Truth had crushed silence. On his last night sitting on the porch before winter set in, Elias looked at the flag swaying gently above him. The stars flickered against the dark sky. He drew a breath, his voice low, steady, spoken not for neighbors or cameras but for himself and the men who could no longer hear. "They told me I didn't belong. Funny, I've belonged here longer than they ever will." And with that, silence returned, deep, unbroken, dignified. The kind of silence that ends wars without firing a single shot.